Hi, and welcome to Full Moon Film Buff, episode 37. We're going to discuss The Catman of Paris from 1946. I rented this from Scarecrow Video. I had not seen this or even heard of it until recently. Let's discuss the prominent crew and cast. The film was directed by Leslie Sealander, written by Sherman L. Lowe, with effects makeup by Bob Mark. Leslie Sealander is generally considered to be the most prolific director of feature westerns of all time, with at least 107 to his credit between 1935 and 1967. The cast includes Carl Esmond as Charles Rainier, Lenore Aubert as Marie Audet, Adele Mara as Marguerite Duval, and Douglas Dumbrill as Henry Borchard. This is our second time seeing Lenore Aubert, who had appeared in the conclusion to the Universal Wolfman saga in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. This is a fine movie. It's certainly not as good as the Universal movies of the same era. The story is a little simplistic, almost on the level of an older, perhaps silent film. There is a real high-quality buggy chase in this movie. And my favorite part is the Catman mythos that they create. So make sure to stick around and hear that discussed in a lot more detail. Overall, sure, if you get a chance, but don't rush out. The interesting tidbit here is one of the reasons I had never heard of this film is that Republic Pictures did not produce enough horror films during their time to put together a televised syndication package once television became a big deal. As a result, once Republic completed the first run, these films never got a real subsequent re-release on television, the way a lot of other horror movies did. And it was rarely seen and almost forgotten for over 70 years. I'm glad I saw it from just a film history point of view. So now let's cover the synopsis. Two rich gentlemen take in dinner and a dance number. One is the writer Charles Rainier, who authored a book about a human-killing Catman who may or may not be myth. Charles confirms to his friend, Henry Borchard, over dinner that he has made enemies in the government as a result of his controversial work. Charles is getting mysterious headaches and visions of storms. This is a holdover of an illness Charles experienced in the tropics. A librarian, Devereaux, is murdered, clawed to death. A book he had carried was stolen, with documents that are related to a historical secret trial. The police suspect Charles. Apparently, Charles's book bears uncanny similarities to the secret case files, which he should not have had access to. Charles says he made up his story, and any similarities are purely coincidental. However, Charles also cannot remember where he was last night. Charles tries to end his engagement to Marguerite Duval. He's just not in love with her anymore, but she won't hear of it. Driving home that night, Marguerite is killed in a similar manner to the librarian. Charles starts up a relationship with his old friend Marie Adele. Charles is attacked by 4 upright citizen vigilantes. Marie tries to hide the news about Marguerite's death from Charles. Charles suspects himself. Marie insists he is innocent. I guess love is blind because she's got no reason to. We get an old school buggy chase between the police and Charles with shots fired. It's really impressive stunt work. It's only my favorite action scene in the movie. Charles and Marie hide out at a country chateau. Charles goes a little hysterical and Henry gives him a good old slap to calm him down. Henry thinks Charles did it, but not consciously. Henry wants to smuggle Charles out of France. The head inspector relates the legends and lore of shape-changing mixed with alchemy and astrology. Very mystical mumbo-jumbo. He details the history of 8 previous visitations by the Catman. This cop is all in on the Catman. The other policeman remains skeptical. Henry leaves the chateau to make travel arrangements. He gives Marie a gun, just in case. Just in case an intruder attacks her, which happens, of course. Marie shoots the intruder to no effect. However, the policeman's guns work just fine when they show up. Turns out, Marie's gun was loaded with blanks. The Catman turns out to be Henry, who confesses to his crimes with his dying breath. He telepathically gave Charles the idea for the book and protected Charles. This is his 9th and final life. Charles and Marie kiss. The end. So there's really only one transformation scene in this whole movie, the death scene as Henry dies and reverts to his human form, and it's one single dissolve from Catman to human. That's primitive, even for 1946. That said, I really like the makeup job. It certainly bears some similarities to the other 40s era werewolf makeup jobs, but it's much sleeker, more civilized looking, less feral monster and more supernatural killer. The makeup job is fine. The transformation was pretty weak. Now, the werewolf lore. This is easily my favorite part of the movie because it is so new. The Catman of Paris absolutely meets the criteria that we've set out for what is a lycanthrope, right? There's a human, Henry, turning into a predatory animal. A cat owner can tell you how much cats enjoy killing, and back. While this lore doesn't seem to give the Catman any supernatural weaknesses, he does get shot by ordinary ordnance. It does establish a wholly unique origin myth, a transformation method, and an ultimate fate. I cannot think of another story I've watched so far, it's possible we'll come across more, that leaned so hard into the shape changing as a mythical skill that's learned by the shape changer. Henry is in control of his transformations and has some additional mentalist powers on top of that. In some ways, he reminds me very much of a villainous version of the Shadow. They threw in a bit of mumbo jumbo related to astrology and some much more interesting references to alchemy, which is a really interesting thematic element. It's got a real interesting relationship with the idea of lycanthropy, which we're going to talk about a little more. So let's talk about alchemy. First, we need to go over a real brief history of alchemy. Alchemy is an ancient branch of natural philosophy practiced across the world, including China, India, the Muslim world, and Europe. Alchemists developed laboratory techniques that are still in use today and theories that have influenced chemistry since the beginning. Alchemy had a huge impact on the development of modern scientific disciplines like chemistry and physics. Alchemists contributed to major chemical industries like metallurgy, the production of paints, inks, and dyes, cosmetics. Alchemists improved manufacturing in industries like glassmaking, steel development, cloth dyeing, and rust prevention. Alchemy was also influenced by philosophy, astronomy, and religion. They guarded their work very zealously, using codes and cryptic symbolism. Eventually, alchemy became infamous for fraud and extortion during the 18th century, and scientists began to separate the real achievements off into chemistry, metallurgy, pharmacology, and medicine from the less savory aspects of alchemy. Now, the interplay of alchemy and lycanthropy seems obvious once it's pointed out, but I'd never really considered it before. That's what makes this so fascinating. Alchemy aimed to purify certain metals, usually calling them base metals like lead, into noble metals like gold. They also sought to create an elixir of immortality and a panacea that could cure any disease. Alchemists sought to perfect humanity. It makes perfect sense to think about lycanthropy and transmuting beast into man, and vice versa, as related to alchemy. Its spiritual aspects interested historians of esotericism, psychologists, philosophers, and spiritualists. This blend of the mystical and the physical is perfectly expressed in the metaphor of the lycanthrope. This film leans heavily into all of these metaphors in a cool way. Henry says he studied and learned these skills. This isn't a curse. This isn't a disease. This isn't something that happened to him. This is something that he went out and sought. He has extended his lifespan 9 times over. He's given himself mentalist powers. I really hope we see more werewolf films in the future that take this approach. Really fascinating. Now, I previously mentioned the Shadow, so let's talk about him for a second. The Shadow is a fictional character created by Walter B. Gibson. The Shadow is known for his famous catchphrase,
"Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?" The Shadow knows.
He has a psychic ability to cloud people's minds and therefore become invisible. He's not really invisible, but if they can't see him, what does it matter? It makes him a formidable crime fighter. He is often depicted wearing a flowing cloak, wielding 2 .45 automatic pistols. He operates in New York City and battles against gangsters, spies, mad scientists, and any other mad criminal he can find. He works with a whole network of agents, but their identities are unknown to him, and his identity is unknown to them. He was created for radio drama and has been adapted into every other form of media you can think of, including comic books, comic strips, serials, video games, feature films. There's probably novels out there. I haven't found any, but I haven't looked. The Shadow's popularity has made him into one of the most influential and enduring characters of the pulp era. He's been compared to Batman, as both characters use their skills and resources to fight crime. The Shadow's stories are fast-paced, filled with exciting action sequences. There's clever plot twists, The character has inspired a lot of other comic book and film heroes. And I can definitely see the Shadow's influence here. This film was released at the height of the Shadow's popularity. It's easy to imagine how a character that popular would consciously and unconsciously influence other artists and creators. Henry is a villainous adaptation of the Shadow archetype. He studied and honed his metaphysical and alchemical skills to the point where he could transmute his own body and read the minds of his victims. It kind of makes me want to listen to some old pulp radio dramas or read a dime store paperback. Really, really fun. I enjoyed it. A couple little teeny tiny minor observations to end on. I laughed out loud every time they used the sound cue of the cat's meow. It's just not as threatening, scary, or intimidating as a wolf's howl. I don't find the black cat that they would occasionally show on screen to bring the sense of impending doom that the filmmakers probably wanted to. Overall, just it was not. It made me laugh more than made me jump or get scared. And finally, the most unbelievable aspect of the movie here is just how fabulously wealthy Charles is as a result of his career writing genre fiction novels. I mean, rich authors do exist in the world, but usually that's on the strength of a long series of books, right? Not on what appears to be their debut novel. Of course, it's not critical to the story. It doesn't break anything. And it's entirely possible that Charles could be wealthy as a consequence of inherited wealth. He is engaged to a wealthy heiress, after all, so it wouldn't be that surprising if he himself is also a wealthy heir. It was just a minor observation that really interested in me and made me laugh. So if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Next, we're going to jump back to the 1970s to watch The Werewolf of Washington from 1973. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bolt in the chamber, and we'll see you back here next episode.